Psst. Hey, you.
Yeah, you.
Are you into weird shit? Yeah?
You into cryptids?
What about hauntings? Yeah, I've got a ghost for you.
Oh, you like otherworldly beings?
Me too. Check out all these aliens. We have plenty. How do you feel about a good legend?
Want to hear about spooky happenings?
Yeah, you do.
Let us show you what we've got.
Hey guys, grab a drink and join us, Amanda and Sean, every week while we dive into the strange and haunting topics that have piqued our interest.
See you over at The Haunted and the Strange, wherever you get your podcasts.
Stay spooky.
Welcome to the D.E.A.D podcast, where I discuss all things spooky and weird. I'm Desi, and today I'll be talking about the Yurei. Let's get started. Hey everyone, how's everyone doing tonight? I hope y'all are doing good. Tonight I am drinking one of my beers. I had one left of the Nueces Brewing beer that I always drink. I'll post a picture of it, but I had one left, so I grabbed that. And I am wearing tonight a t-shirt, and it looks like a Grim Reaper skeleton, and he has big black wings. He's like cloaked, and he's holding a chain leash with 3 scary looking dogs on it with like the spike collars and everything. They look like demon dogs. They have like red eyes and stuff. But I thought it was cute because it had 3 dogs on it. So that's what I am wearing tonight, and I'll post a picture of that. And tonight we are going to be talking about the Yurei. And this kind of has to do with last week's episode with the Okigahara forest. I mentioned the Yurei in there, so I decided to kind of expand on the Yurei and go into what it is and some stories about that. So let's get started. Japan lives with its ghost like few other cultures. Since ancient times, Japan's religion and culture has been deeply bound with ghosts called Yurei. Both feared and revered, Yurei are part of the deep magic, a foundational belief that humans have a god inside of them. This powerful supernatural entity, called Reikon or Tamashi, is held in check only by the meat cocoon of the body. On death, the spirit is unleashed for good or ill. The spirits of the dead continue to exist in the unseen world, which is everywhere about us, and they all become gods of varying character and degrees of influence. If properly respected with the correct rituals, a person's spirit becomes a protective ancestor deity called Kami or Sorei. But if something goes wrong, if the spirit has some lingering business, or if death rites are not properly performed, then a Yurei is born. Yurei can be translated as faint spirit or dim spirit. Yurei are typically depicted as pale, ethereal figures, often dressed in white funeral garments or shroud-like attire. They may have long, black, unkempt hair and are often portrayed as having a floating, weightless quality, sometimes lacking legs. As it is no longer part of this world, the Yurei cannot walk on the ground like humans would. It wanders in limbo, which gives it that characteristic floating appearance. Yurei are believed to be souls that linger due to unresolved issues, strong emotions, or unfinished business, such as vengeance, love, or regret. This emotional attachment prevents them from moving on to the afterlife, such as a mother searching for her lost child or a lover yearning for their deceased partner. Yurei can be categorized into several subtypes depending on the nature of their death and the emotions they carry into the afterlife. The Onryo are vengeful spirits and some of the most feared Yurei in Japanese culture. They are believed to bring disaster, illness, or death to those who wronged them. Onryo often arise from instances of betrayal, murder, or mistreatment, and seek revenge from beyond the grave. These spirits have featured prominently in Japanese theater, film, and literature, such as The Ring and The Grudge. Ubume, the spirit of a woman who died during childbirth or while caring for a young child. These spirits often appear holding a baby, wandering and weeping, and are usually trying to care for their child in death as they did in life. Zashiki Urashi, although not malevolent, these are childlike spirits or ghosts of children that haunt a specific room or house. They are considered to bring good fortune to those who live in harmony with them. The Funayure are the spirits of people who died at sea, often manifesting as ghosts who try to sink boats or drown the living. They are prominent in coastal areas and are said to come out during stormy nights. The Goryeo are spirits of nobles or people of high rank who died violently or unjustly. Goryeo are often worshipped as gods to appease their spirits and prevent them from seeking revenge on the living. Yurei can never be destroyed, only sated. Desire is the key to Yurei. They want something. This drives them, gives them purpose. Their manifestation can be as benign as delivering a final thank you never said while alive, to as terrifying as shattering the earth with rage. Since ancient times, natural disasters were said to be the result of Yurei, wielders of fire, flood, and earthquake. There is nothing more fearsome than an angry Japanese ghost. Yurei are deeply embedded in Japanese Shinto and Buddhist traditions. In Shintoism, death is often viewed as a source of pollution, and the spirits of the dead can become restless if proper rites are not observed. Buddhism adds another layer, as it teaches that a soul may linger if it has unresolved attachments or emotions. Appeasing a yurei can involve a number of rituals and acts, depending on the reason they have remained earthbound. Some of the methods include proper funeral rites, ensuring that the deceased has a proper funeral with the necessary prayers, offerings, and rites can help their spirit find peace. Resolving unfinished business. If the yurei has unresolved issues, often to settle these matters, such as righting a wrong or delivering a message, can ease the spirit's suffering. Offerings and prayers. Many families offer food, incense, and prayers to pacify restless ghosts. Shrines may also be built to honor a yurei, especially in cases where the spirit is believed to have significant power, as is the case with Goryo. There are many taboos associated with yurei. For example, it is considered bad luck to speak about the dead in a disrespectful manner or to disturb a grave. There are also specific places, such as cemeteries and certain homes, that are thought to be haunted by yurei. Historical texts, such as the Chronicles of Japan and the Tales of Times Now Past, mention spirits of the dead. By the Edo period, between 1603 and 1868, yurei became a popular subject in folklore, theater, and art, solidifying their image in Japanese culture. One of the most significant cultural events associated with yurei is the Obon Festival, held in mid-August. This Buddhist festival is a time to honor the spirits of ancestors. Families prepare offerings to guide the spirits back to their resting places, symbolizing respect and remembrance. In contemporary culture, Yurei have become a popular theme in literature, film, and art. They are often depicted in horror stories, anime, and manga, where their tragic stories evoke empathy rather than just fear. Some famous examples include Ringu, or The Ring, a film that features a vengeful spirit exemplifying the Onryo archetype; Ju-on, or The Grudge, another horror franchise that explores themes of vengeance and the impact of past traumas on the living. Yurei symbolize not only fear of the unknown, but also the unresolved emotional burdens that can haunt the living. They remind people of the importance of honoring and remembering the dead, as well as the consequences of neglecting these cultural responsibilities. These are some of the most famous Yurei ghost stories told today. The first one is Oiwa, the ghost of Yotsuya. Owa is one of the most famous vengeful Yurei in Japanese folklore, thanks to the enduring legend of Yotsuya Kaden, the ghost story of Yotsuya. This story, which originated as a kabuki play in the Edo period, is one of Japan's most famous ghost stories and has been retold in countless films, books, and television shows. Oiwa was a beautiful woman who was betrayed by her husband, Eamon, who sought to marry a wealthy woman. In an attempt to get rid of Oiwa, Eamon conspired to disfigure her by giving her poison disguised as medicine. The poison caused her face to become horribly scarred and disfigured. Devastated, Oiwa fell into madness and died, either by accident or through murder by Eamon. After her death, her vengeful spirit returned to haunt him. Oiwa's ghost appears with her disfigured face, her long hair hanging over her wounds, seeking revenge on those who wronged her. It is said that actors and producers of Yotsuya Kaden often experience strange accidents, curses, or hauntings due to the powerful energy associated with Oiwa's vengeful spirit. Another famous Yurei story is that of Okiku, the tragic heroine of the legend The Dish Mansion. Okiku was a servant girl working for a samurai named Oyama Tesan. Tesan desired her, but when she refused his advances, he decided to manipulate her into a terrible situation. He falsely accused her of breaking one of his family's 10 valuable dishes, an offense punishable by death. Tasan either tortured Okiku or had her thrown into a well, where she drowned. After her death, Okiku's ghost emerged from the well, and every night she would count the dishes, 1, 2, 3, and so on, until she reached 9. At 9, she would wail loudly, unable to find the 10th dish, her sorrow echoing through the night. The story often ends with Okiku haunting Tasan or anyone else who lives near the well. In some versions, a Buddhist priest or monk is called to release her from the torment, but the image of Okiku's spirit rising from the well remains one of Japan's most chilling ghostly apparitions today. The well is believed to be located at Hemji Castle, where the people claim they still hear her counting. Otsuyu, the peony lantern ghost. The story of Otsuyu is a classic Japanese ghost tale often referred to as Botan Doro, the tale of the peony lantern. It is a tragic love story between a living man and the spirit of a woman. The story begins when a lonely man named Ogiwara falls in love with a beautiful woman named Otsuyu, whom he meets during the Oban festival, a time when it is believed the dead return to visit the living. Otsuyu visits him every night, always carrying a peony lantern. Their love affair seems perfect, but Ogiwara's neighbor eventually becomes suspicious and follows the woman, discovering that Otsuyu is a ghost. She and her servant are nothing but skeletons when seen through the neighbor's eyes. When Ogiwara is informed, he falls ill, heartbroken over the discovery that his lover is a spirit. Despite warnings, Ogiwara cannot resist his love for Otsuyu and returns to her grave, where he lies down with her bones, ultimately dying in the process. In some versions, they are found intertwined together in the grave. This story is part of Japan's rich tradition of kaiden or ghost stories and is often used as a cautionary tale about the consequences of becoming entangled with the supernatural. Yurei encapsulate a complex interplay of cultural beliefs about death, memory, and the spiritual world in Japan. They serve as a reminder of the emotional connections between the living and the dead, emphasizing the need for respect and remembrance. Through stories and rituals, Yurei continued to influence Japanese culture, reflecting societal values and fears regarding life, death, and the afterlife. Now I'm going to be telling you about a supposed encounter with a Yurei. It was a hot summer. You know how hot the summers can get here, right? It was the hottest summer we'd had in a long while. The wettest, too. The rice paddies were overflowing with their dirty brown water, and the mosquitoes were breeding like crazy. At night, the croaking of the frogs that lived in the rice paddies was almost deafening. But of course, once you are used to hearing something, you put it out of conscious thought. We lived in a small village about 600 kilometers from the town where I attended school. I didn't want to go to the local school in my village, which only had 13 students in each year group. I wanted a real school experience. I wanted to be a nurse, so I begged and pleaded my parents to let me attend the school in town. A bus took me about 300 kilometers of the way home, a rickety old thing that smelled like smoke and oil and made your clothes smell the same way. I hated that. All the pretty town girls in their freshly pressed uniforms used to giggle and hold their noses when they walked by me. I had club practice every day after school. I was a member of the tennis club. I was hoping to become the club leader during my final year at that school. I practiced very hard and made sure the club area and changing rooms were tidy. One night in late July, I was returning home. I rode the stuffy bus in the unbearable heat, feeling faint from the lack of ventilation. The old, itchy material of the seats irritated the skin on my bare legs. About 45 minutes later, after climbing the winding single lane road up the side of the mountain, I reached my stop, the last stop. I shouldered my worn old bag filled with heavy books and homework, thanked the bus driver, and departed the vehicle. I sighed as I began the long walk to my home. It was dark, even now in modern times. If you go to rural Japan at night, you will see true black. The road home was long, but thankfully straight and flat, both sides surrounded by rice fields with their mosquitoes and croaking frogs. I could feel the sweat trickle down my neck and legs, the mosquitoes buzzing around me as I trudged onwards, eager to sit in front of the new electric fan my father had bought for my mother the previous month. It was state of the art at that time. No one else in the village could afford an electric fan or to run it. My father was so proud when he brought it home. The road was very poorly lit due to my father's job in the city. Our family was financially stable. However, the rest of the town was very run down and overlooked by local government office. Farmers living from hand to mouth, there was one dim yellow streetlight every 500 meters or so on the road home, not enough to provide light for seeing, just enough to keep you straight on your route. There were 5 of these lights between the bus stop and my home. I was almost at lamppost number 3 when a chill went through me, a shiver. I stopped where I stood, skin crawling, and suddenly trembling. The sweat on my skin from the intense heat present just seconds ago felt like ice. My brain didn't have time to process what was happening. Everything happened very quickly. The frogs stopped singing their summer lullaby. The mosquitoes stopped their hunting. The air was still, silent, perfect. I could only think about the streetlight ahead, still glowing dimly in the pitch black. The stars above twinkled innocently, like nothing was amiss. I forced myself to walk forward a few steps, increasing the pace when I heard the tapping of footsteps behind me. I almost made it to the light. I was on the outskirts of its amber glow when I felt a tug, a hold on the hem of my skirt, strong enough to stop me dead. Time, a scratchy, childish whisper called out from behind me. Time, it repeated again with a bit more intensity. I turned around slowly and looked down at the blue-gray hand which held onto my shirt. Dressed in a light yukata stood a little girl, or what looked eerily similar. Her black hair long and limp over her body, which twitched and jerked as she stood. I looked at her face. I will never forget that face. Empty eye sockets seemed to gaze into my soul, and her mouth moved the words time over and over with increasing speed. It began to sound like a curse, so I struggled to get free, crying and shrieking, trying to drag myself into the light. Suddenly, the girl grabbed me by the front of my shirt and pulled me down to eye level. Time, she whispered into my ear. The chill from her voice settled in my heart. She screamed an unearthly howl and pushed me away from her, violently clawing at her empty eye sockets. I staggered backwards into the dim glow of the streetlight, only to stumble over something on the ground behind me. I fell to the ground, bruising my tailbone. When I looked up, the girl was gone. I panted heavily for a second, regaining my bearings. The frogs were chirping their tune, and the mosquitoes were hosting a buffet on my sweat-drenched skin. I stood slowly and brushed myself down, looking around for any movement in the darkness. Nothing. Picking my bag off the floor, I spotted what must have caused me to fall. A single shoe, brown leather, school style, not too different from my own. I made a decision right then to run home. By goodness, did I run. My lungs felt like they were going to explode with fire, and my heart felt like it would jump right out of my chest. My mother dropped the dish she was washing when I burst through the door, crying and shrieking like a small child. It took them well over an hour to calm me down enough to talk. I recalled the event to them as I rocked back and forth, sat with my knees tucked under my chin. My parents thought I was stressed, school, club, and the journey home taking its toll on me. My mother warned me not to exert myself, and once my father came home, he promised to pick me up from school after he finished work on an evening. No more bus journeys and walking in the dark for the time being. That settled me a little. In the safety of my home, surrounded by my family, I wondered whether I had just imagined it all. My grandmother was having none of it. A strong believer in the spirit world and Yurei, she went to the local shrine the next morning and purchased some protective talismans, one for the house, one to fold up and put in the front pocket of my shirt. The charms were just in case. She told me that if the Yurei meant me harm, it would have done so there and then. She thought it was a guardian from the other side, maybe a minor god or lost spirit. She also thought that it was an omen or warning. 2 days later, the body of a local junior high student, Mickey, was pulled out of the flooded rice paddy. She was missing a shoe. Her family had to identify her bloated, decomposed body. No signs of struggle. Cause of death? Shock. Over the next 3 months, a total of 6 girls went missing from around the area. Every 2 weeks, the time of death stated for each at around 8 or 9 p.m. Each girl had been traveling home in a remote location. All were found wearing their school uniforms. The day that I had my spiritual encounter was the day that Mickey died. I had stayed behind a little bit later to help clean the club room, so I had taken the later bus home. I felt terrible for Mickey's family. I still do. After all these years, I try not to think about what would have happened if I went home on time that day. They never caught the person responsible. The police were not trained or prepared for such an event to happen in their small towns. To the best of my knowledge, the case was never closed. I hate to think of what those poor girls went through. I only hope their spirits find peace in the afterlife. Some said that vengeful spirits killed them, envious of their life, youth, and vitality. The more modern of us believed that a sick person was out there hunting down young girls. Unfortunately, it looks like we will never know which. The families of those girls will never know peace. That brings me to the end of this episode. Thanks for listening to the D.E.A.D podcast. Please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at the D.E.A.D podcast. Also, feel free to send in your stories, episode suggestions, or feedback at the dead podcast one at gmail.com or send me a DM on Instagram. Also, be sure to check out the D.E.A.D podcast merch. Right now, through November 2nd, the new Halloween collection is available, so be sure to get yours while you can. The link is in the show notes. If you enjoyed this show, please rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you are listening on, and be sure to come back next week for my next episode.